Welcome to the State of the Mist podcast. I'm Criff.
And I'm Salamander.
And we're here to bring you all the latest, greatest news about World vs. World for the game Guild Wars 2.
Yeah, has been a while.
We have a special guest today.
Hey, I am Sheff. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me. I have played World vs. World for 5-6 years, something like that. I got stuck in near the end of POF. I have mained Necromancer for most of that time. I have been told by other people that I am a decent firebrand. I've played a little bit of Berserker, a little bit of Tempest. Like, really the only blind spots for me are Vindicator, anything to do with Thief, because Thief doesn't really exist, unfortunately, and Druid. And within the last year to a year and a half or so, I've also started picking up Commanding, figuring that element of World vs. World out, and also doing a bit of content creation and streaming to kind of talk about some of the things that I've learned over that process in the last 5 years, and maybe help some other people out getting invested into World vs. World as well and having some fun with it.
Yeah, really happy to have you here.
Yeah, I've had several good interactions with Sheff, and we thought it'd be nice to do kind of a crossover, cross-promotion thing and get some of his thoughts on some World vs. World topics. All right, so we can jump right in. We do have actually a fair amount of stuff to go over because we haven't had an episode in, I don't know, a couple months. But
yeah, it's been a while. I am going to sit a good portion of this out just because I'm coughing a ton. But yeah.
Good time to have a guest.
Perfect timing.
I would be happy to fill. Myself is one of my favorite topics.
Yeah, I can talk about World vs. World all day, so it's nice to have people to talk about it with. All right, so the first thing we got on our list here is the pairing change. There was a nice news announcement in November, giving us a bunch of details. And so now, in the current system, we'll just assume, there's people that have never played World vs. World in here, so we'll just, lay it all out there and try to avoid abbreviations and everything. But right now, two servers are linked up together as a team for a period of, it was 2 months. And now, for this week, it's going to be chopped down to 1 month. So we'll have only 4 weeks as a team versus the previous 2-month period. And I don't know, I'm excited about it. It seems like keeping things fresh and a positive change. I don't know, Sheff, your thoughts on that one?
No, I think it's a really good change. I have noticed that there is some difference between how much NA servers seem to like it and how much EU servers seem to like it, primarily because there are 4 tiers in NA and there's 5 tiers in EU, which means that you can get unlucky with RNG in a relink period for EU and have some servers never even have the opportunity to play each other. But one of the biggest issues, at least I think right now in the current World vs. World environment, is how stagnant matches we get near the end of the 2-month relink period. You've been with the same server for a month and a half at this point. Unless you're really lucky, you've been in the same tier for majority of that time. You've either been like stranded at the bottom of T4 or you've been stuck at the top of T1 because you were either on Blackgate or Magumo or linked to them. And I think the 4-week period instead of the 8-week period is just great for adding a bit of variety to the game mode. You get to see more people, you get to play against more people, you get to play with more people. It broadens the recruiting pool up a bit because there's this continuous cycle of players that's moving in and out of getting linked. And I think it'll be a nice end to the way that the current server structure works. Well, ANET puts the finishing touches on the restructuring system, which is just going to be a whole cloth replacement for the way that things work right now.
I agree, yeah. The variety of matchups and the variety of teammates is really key to making the game fresh and fun. And I did really kind of feel after a month things were getting stale and salty, and like, you've worked with all the guilds on your team and you know what they're about, and you're either really happy or really unhappy at that point.
I cross my heart on this. I promise you no FA bias, but 2 relink periods ago, we were basically stuck in T1 for the entire second half of the month, and then the relink period immediately after that, we were linked to Devona's Rest, and we spent the entire 2 months stuck in T4. I promise you that to the extent that I can control my own biases, I am not biased in my enjoyment of the 4-month or the 4-week relink period based on my personal experiences.
Yeah, I mean that's all we've got is personal experiences to go off of, which is what makes this game mode so hard to nail down. Is that your personal experience may be the opposite of mine, but I mean in this case, yeah, I'm all with you. Like we've been stuck in tier 4 all this link. We have not left it, so the matchups have been kind of stale, and I'm eager to kind of get something different. But yeah, you're right. The feedback I was seeing from some of the EU people was not the same. They seem to have kind of different goals and viewpoints as far as moving up and down the tiers and beating everybody and going to the top, whatever.
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't really realize how different the EU meta was from the NA meta until I really started to get into content creation and started to talk to people, because obviously EU viewers will also pop in on Twitch streams. They'll pop in on YouTube videos and be like, oh, that's interesting. Here's how it is over here. So I don't know, maybe that's like an early New Year's resolution for me, is to spin up an EU account and kind of get some experience with the way things happen across the Atlantic.
I'm thinking about that too. Yeah, I've been slowly building up an alt account. Maybe it's time to go across the ocean with it.
And for any EU listeners as well, if you've got the free time and a bit of free resources, spin an NA account up. See how we do things over here.
Yeah, there's always mention of, ping and lag and stuff being an issue playing on the opposite servers, but I kind of want to test that out and see the legit difference for myself. Because, I mean, my dream has always been united servers, so EU and NA are together, and that way we have all-day coverage,
Yeah, that would be neat.
Yeah, my ping isn't too bad, but when it's bad, it's really bad. Normally it sits out about 100 when I'm playing on NA servers, and when we're hit with like internet stability, it'll go between 300 and like 7,000 milliseconds. But yeah.
7,000?
Yeah, sometimes it gets really bad, but most of the time it's pretty stable.
If all our poor OCX players can find a way to peer into the matrix and play on whatever ping they get in like the middle of the outback in Australia, I'm sure we can figure it out too, though.
A lot of them I've talked to have kind of developed a play style around lag and like they anticipate things moving slow. It's totally different.
Yeah, just like a really predictive play style.
And yeah, it's also a goal of ours to have more guests on here, and getting some EU people to give their perspective would be awesome too. But hard to find somebody that we can schedule during this time frame that also can speak, our same language, because the EU has a lot of German, French, Spanish players too that can't necessarily. But yeah, other than the shortening of the relinks, and another thing with the shortening of the relinks is that the reason they gave for that was to make it similar to how the upcoming world restructuring is going to go.
I believe that's true, but I think it's also kind of like a cyclical problem. This wasn't a part of the game mode. This wasn't a part of the game that I played for. This was discussions that happened like way before I started playing. So I've heard it anecdotally from other people. But my understanding is that there were actually different lengths of time that a matchup was going to be, like when the original system was conceived. And that this is actually something that they've wanted to fiddle around with for a little bit. Because it's also the case that like if you did restructuring could also just be 8 weeks. And so I think this is actually an effort by the current dev team to kind of switch things up a bit, beta test a couple different things at the same time they're doing restructuring and seeing what kind of impact it has, so that they can make a better decision for how long matchup lengths should be when restructuring actually comes out.
Right. And I don't think it's ever been set in stone or even suggested how long they wanted the seasons to be. I mean, I guess we've all assumed it would be 2 months like the links, but it could be any length of time.
I've seen a lot of people suggesting unironically that 1 week matchups would be fun, and there's times when I agree with them.
I mean, I don't. That would be really short, like a lot of team remaking. But since the teams are really just your guild at this point, I could see it. I could see it working.
There might be a little tiering issue though with that, unless they
It would
go based
invalidate
off
the score
of
system entirely. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at least a month seems kind of logical to me. I think the 4 week is probably going to be a nice bet. But one of the comments from one of the EU people is that they don't like 4 weeks specifically because with their having 5 tiers, then people in tier 4 don't have a chance to quote unquote win and get to tier 1. So that's, I mean, I guess a consideration if winning matters and the scoring in tiers stay the same, but I don't really see that as a big thing. And another thought is that maybe with restructuring and the way things will be condensed, maybe there won't be 5 tiers anymore. Maybe it will be condensed.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I'm actually really interested to hear more about in the current system, because there have been some pretty big fluctuations of server population recently in like the last 2 months or so, where NA has had some population problems, EU's had some population problems. People in NA have been talking about, what happened if we would have a tier 5 and we added 3 new servers to the game just to offload some of this population. One of the things that we don't know much about yet is whether the restructuring system is going to be able to dynamically create and remove shards from one of those 1 month matchup periods to account for population changes. So like if there's a particularly busy month of NA World versus World, the next matchup might just include, 3 more servers and shove them into the matchup. And then if population goes down, they could dynamically remove those servers and have a much better way of controlling some of the overall population issues in World versus World so we can avoid things like queues. But I don't think we've heard anything about whether their system is going to be able to do that yet or not, which I'm really interested in.
I don't know if it'd be something that it could just be automated, but I mean, manually they definitely could do it because at some point they unlinked and linked the server, and so I think they could. It just might be more of an involved thing that would be more rare, but I mean, it might be a good thing to see though. Like I think the NA population would support a tier 5. I think it is kind of getting bloated, and a lot of servers see a lot of NA queues, so I think it could happen.
Oh, let's fight then, because I think it would be a bad idea.
Yeah.
I think that we're in a particularly high period of activity right now, and that as soon as that activity drops, T5 is going to be the absolute worst place you want to be. It's just going to be completely dead.
I don't know, man. Well, I guess we play in different worlds, so we have different experiences on that. I mean, how often do you see queues on your NA times?
On reset, we can't flip maps, even if we go for 3 hours. The servers are basically queue locked on Fridays. On weekdays, we're usually queued out of 1 map, sometimes 2 maps, where it's not necessarily that the map is queued, but we can't take our group of 20 to 25 and just go to whatever map we want because it's already occupied. And that's with Anvil Rock, which is like a slightly larger than average server, but is by no means the biggest NA servers out there. It's not like we're linked to, Emery Bay or anything like that, where when I'm on my Emery Bay account, there's nights where you only get to go to 1 map, and sometimes you have to wait to get into that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's varied from when we've transferred greatly. I mean, GOM, Gates of Madness, is a queue nightmare. I mean, on NA, probably all the maps are queued because it's just so flooded with NA guilds and NA players in the evening time. Crystal Desert now, not so much. We're linked to NSP, which is also NA heavy, so we'll see 1 map queued. I mean, the same as you, and then we won't really be able to move because we can't fit everybody in another map. But it's definitely got up. Like it is a kind of a period of high activity. I guess maybe because of the holiday season. Is that what you're thinking, or why do you think this is a high activity level?
I think it's a couple things. I think it's people have a little more free time because the holiday season's coming up. You're not going to school anymore. Your classes aren't happening anymore. I also think it's been like a relatively good year for World versus World, broadly speaking. So, my only perspective is what's happened in the last 5 years, because that's as long as I've been playing. But when I started playing, I existed in the support scrapper meta, where you had 2 options for support classes, period. Not even like boon support or heals. You could play Firebrand to give stab, or you could play Scrapper to cleanse Gandhis. and that was it. There was no meta diversity. And in the last year to a year and a half or so, we've seen different viable options emerge. You can play Druid now, you can play Tempest now, you can play Scourge now relatively recently, you can play Vindicator. And I think when people have a profession that they like, that's viable in World versus World, or they have a profession that's new that they haven't gotten to play before, and I think we're kind of seeing this happen with the Chaos Inspiration Chronomancer build as well, I think people get excited and they want to play it. Plus, we've had like the rewards rebalance where we have a weekly vendor now and you can exchange currencies. We have weekly achievements in the tab. We have better rewards for support players. I think there's been a lot of really good quality of life changes recently for World versus World that have people excited to play it.
Yeah, it is stuff that's kind of gradually creeped in over the, I don't know, last year and a half. But yeah, I mean, you're right. The support changes are good. The balance, the class variety is really good. Build options. I don't know how much that's bringing in new people. I think it might be bringing back older players that are wanting to retry stuff. But I'm seeing a lot of just new people in the game, in World vs. World specifically, and I think it's mostly the expansion rollover. Like about now, people have bought the expansion, they finished the PvE, which there wasn't that much, so it didn't take them that long. And now they're looking at endgame and getting into, at least trying World versus World. And they've had a few XP buffs events, which that just blows out the population levels. So I think, I mean, maybe some of A, maybe some of B, but I'm kind of hoping these are genuinely new players that are gonna, at least some portion of them stay and kind of buff up the population where we have an active place.
It also could have been the Steam release. Was the Steam release this year, or was that like late last year?
Good question. It was not terribly long ago, and I think that did have some impact. I don't know. But that could be the same effect that they were trying out the PvE first, and now they're trickling into World versus World.
That was last year. I Googled it. It was August 23. I'm sorry, I'm old. I can't remember things anymore.
Yeah, I'm with you. The passage of time is weird.
But that could be part of it. I don't know why we would see it like a year down the road, but maybe new expansion hype plus Steam release hype plus people saying like, hey, World versus World isn't horrendous anymore and you're allowed to play more than like 4 classes. It has people thinking that they should give it a try.
Yeah, I felt like the reception from the gaming community was good with this expansion. Not necessarily because it was a great expansion, but because there's not a lot of other MMO content out right now. Like the New World kind of fizzled out, and Final Fantasy's just there. World of Warcraft had their expansion, which was basically End of Dragons copy, get them out. So it's not looking good for other games as much. And Guild Wars came out with a fresh expansion and still looks good as a game. So I don't know. I saw a lot of YouTubers, oh, I'm trying out this for the first time, or oh, I'm this versus WoW, that kind of thing. And I don't know. Hopefully, it has some staying power, and the game stays healthy with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing is that Guild Wars is a very easy game to quit, and by that I mean that your gear is never outdated from new expansions. There's never an increased level cap that means that you have to go grind again when you pick it up again. If you quit Guild Wars today and you came back 6 months later, most of the stuff that you had would either like still be fine, or you could just move it to another character and it would be fine. It's a very friendly game for respecting your time and not making you grind too hard on achieving a basic level of playability, although it's extremely grindy for like, fashion unlocks and things like that. And I think that the population of players who kind of like grew up with MMOs, who played WoW in middle school or high school when it came out and were like, wow, this is really neat, are kind of like aging into a demographic where they're looking for a game that doesn't ask them to play it 3 hours every day just to keep up with everyone else.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I'm probably in that demographic myself, although I never played WoW. But I mean, I like to keep new in that middle tier where we don't play every day. We play, 3 or 4 days a week, so it's not super time commitment kind of a situation. So yeah, a lot of that type of demographic does play a lot and enjoys the game, but not necessarily at a try hard, no life level. But yeah, as far as the ability to kind of get in and out of the game, that kind of works into our other topic that they mentioned for January, or well, let me say for Q1. In that same news post, they did say that they are looking to have another world restructuring beta for the first quarter of 2024. And in that beta, and this is kind of interesting, the stuff that they put in the details of this beta, they want it to be the final beta. So that is kind of an indication of progress, although we know things change all the time, and who knows what the timeline is. But this beta in Q1, which by normal people timelines means by March 29th, I got to see a beta, or else you guys are lying to me, ain't it? Listen to that one. But yeah, so this being the final beta, they're hoping they'll be done with beta testing, everything goes well, and then shortly after they just launch it. The same thing we see in beta will be what World vs. World is all the time. And the main things they're really saying that's changing, I mean, visual, UI, whatever, but they're trying to make the matchups more balanced to account for quote unquote commanders, time zones, and more. And
yeah,
that's awesome. I think that's huge potential.
Yeah, so if you're a new player, first of all, welcome. Second of all, you've probably heard people talk about the restructuring system, and you're like, what the heck is that? Because it's not very well documented. There's a system that ArenaNet has said that they want to build for about the last 5 years. It hasn't been actively worked on for all of those 5 years, but it's been something that they've been interested in creating for the World versus World community. And it is decoupling World versus World matchups from having anything to do with servers. So like, Kining versus GOM. And instead replacing those matchups with player organized groups that change on some kind of schedule. The world restructuring system is the process of replacing servers with those player organized groups, and then the alliances system is the UI elements, the social backend, and the coordination elements that would actually allow these player groups to self-organize and work together. The restructuring process is what we're going to be getting, in heavy air quotes, in Q1 2024, which I've played enough ANET properties to know that Q1 2024 is probably going to be like early Q2 2024.
Yeah.
But I do think there's a good shot that the restructuring system goes live at some point in 2024. I think it'll probably happen like late August, early September or so, if I had to make a completely baseless speculation about when we'll see it. And then the alliances system is going to come out after that. There is zero timetable on alliances right now. But the restructuring system alone is going to be really interesting, I think.
I do too. I mean, every beta test that we've gone through with it has been really fun. Like every single one has been more fun than normal World vs. World for at least my experience in my guild. And so yeah, I'm stoked. I mean, I like kind of some of the wording they chose in the news update as far as how they're changing it. And I mean, the terms I use are like, they're going to get rid of the servers. They're going to blow up the servers. The old servers are going to go away. But they say depreciating. We're going to depreciate the current concept of shards, aka worlds or servers. And now they're going to be called teams instead.
Yeah. And so, we've lived through a couple betas at this point, and the actual release function could change. I'd be surprised if it did, but it could change. The way that restructuring is going to work in practice is, say that you are currently a character on Fort Aspenwood. Every week you queue into World versus World, you play with Fort Aspenwood. Every month, you're linked to a different server, and you play with that server for the entire month. But if there's someone else on Fort Aspenwood, you see them every single week. With restructuring, there is going to be a UI element on your guild tab that you can select. And that UI element makes sure that you are placed with other members in your guild in the current matchup. But the matchup that your guild is placed into changes on a month-to-month basis if they keep the same 4-week window. So I could elect to play with my guild, K&T, Knights of the Temple. And all of the players in BOM, a group that we run with pretty frequently, could elect to be in that guild. But under restructuring, there's no guarantee that us and BOM would be in the same matchup. So what you're seeing a lot of players doing to kind of fill that time before Alliances comes out is they're making like mega guilds, just like shell guilds, and inviting 4 or 5 different guilds to them, and then that's the guild that they rep. But if you're a player who doesn't really like have a guild right now, or have a regular guild, or you have multiple different guilds that you like to play with, you can change who you play with every month. You can just be like, this month I feel like playing with, K&T. This month I feel like playing with New. This month I feel like playing with Flux. And you can change that on the fly so that you don't have to transfer anymore, which I think is a really valuable change, both for recruiting and just for being able to like see different people and play against other people in the game mode.
I hadn't really thought about that option of players trying different groups or different alliances or guilds to play with month to month, but that is totally valid, and that's something that is not available now unless you dump a bunch of gems in the game. So that's actually really cool that you can just click a button and you're on another team for the next month without having to dump $20 in the game or whatever.
It's one of the things that I'm most excited about with the restructuring system, because it also facilitates recruitment. Like, I don't know, this is probably not going to be a common perspective because there's just not a very large community of people who are guild leaders in World versus World. Recruiting is so hard right now because for most established servers, you've recruited everyone on that server who wants to be recruited. And the only pool of players that you have to draw from are players who are new to the game mode. It's really hard to find people who are interested in joining a guild who are not like rank 20. And there's some element of that that's fine. Like, you should invite new players and we should help new players get up to speed in the game mode. But the rate of attrition of like people who've decided they don't want to play anymore can be really imbalanced, where you have guilds die out and they're not really able to replenish their recruiting pools because everyone on the server kind of has a home already. And so when restructuring comes out, you're going to be able to recruit anyone. You can recruit anyone from any server, and all they have to do is check a UI element that says, yeah, this is the guild that I want to play with. And I think that's going to be transformative for the way that organized guilds are able to function in World versus World.
Quite a bit, yeah. I mean, there's a variety of different play styles and guilds that exist now, but I totally agree. Like, the recruiting pool is done, and you can't recruit at all if you're on a full server and everybody already has a guild, which we were in that situation. And the guild is faced with, we're gonna, stay static and slowly shrink with time, and maybe there's some other guilds we like here, maybe not, but either way, at some point that guild is kind of pushed into the decision of, if I want to continue to grow, I have to transfer off. I can't stay here. And I mean, in your situation, you're having trouble recruiting. We're not. I had to stop recruiting. We moved to Crystal Desert, and people were just flooding us. Like, there were just people raining down trying to join, popping into Discord and whatever, because there was kind of a lack of a larger guild of our type in that server, so they didn't have anywhere to join. So it's the things are kind of stuck in a static, crusty place right now because of that. Some guilds don't want to invest all those gems to move, and they could be flourishing and having more fun somewhere else, but they don't because they're in this kind of situation, and they're waiting on restructuring to come out, and it'll probably be soon, and they don't want to waste the gems, but yet they're kind of between a rock and a hard place. So that this restructuring hopefully should help with a lot of that.
Yeah. And the one thing that I do want to recognize that, so that we're not like, restructuring is universally popular. If you enjoy the community of a server, like you talk to people regularly who are on your server but have never been in your guild, that is going away, and that does suck. Like, you're not really going to have server identities anymore. And server identities, well, not as pronounced as they used to be during seasons or earlier versions of the game, do still matter and are still important. But because of the way this sort of like shell guild system works until Alliances actually comes out, if you have a community on your server that you like, I would advocate for you making a guild to invite those players to, not necessarily to level up or be like, oh, we're a guild, but literally just for the function of making sure that you wind up in the same matchup, and then you can go back to actually repping whatever guild you want. It's not a perfect solution, but if you do like the community of players that you found on the server, it might be worthwhile for you to try and make a guild that's like, you know, the Stormbluff Isle old fogies, and then just invite all the people on Stormbluff Isle that you like into that guild so that it can be the guild that you rep for restructuring, and you can continue to play with your friends even though they're all in different guilds.
Yes, and I know some guilds and people I've talked to have been hesitant to even go that route because they had some thought that might mess up the results of the beta or something, or maybe ArenaNet doesn't want us to do this. They want to use our normal guilds, but no. In their post, they're specifically saying, in other words, guilds as they exist now can be used as a proxy for alliances. So this is a good thing. This is how the system works. They want us to do it, and if you want to continue to play with your community or your friends or whatever, that's the real benefit of this world restructuring, that we control it now. It's not inertia. It's not ANET. It's not who has more gems. It's choices players make to play together or not. And I don't know. I mean, I don't have a positive view of server loyalty or existing server communities, honestly. Like, this far into the game, the guilds have all transferred, really. Like, there might be 3 or 4 NA guilds that are on their original server. I mean, talking about, larger 30 plus 25, 20 member guilds that have an impact on things. That's when they move, that changes the identity of the server a lot. So you're just left with, I don't know, depending on the server, 10, 20 people that are allowed in map chat. Like, that's your quote unquote server identity. And, those people may not even want to play each other, together. They may be just there because that's the button they clicked when they started the game, and that name means something nostalgic to them. But meanwhile, the people they played with 10 years ago at launch are long gone. So
yeah, I've also never really been like a server loyalty or server pride kind of guy. I've never been like, oh, Fort Espen would way, like a soccer lad hooligan or anything like that. But the one thing that I do want to note is that it's good for content. And what I mean is that World versus World is kind of like weird if you're coming from PvE. If you're coming from PvE, you're like, well, I can't wait for the next dev update to introduce new content that I can do with my friends. Like, I can't wait to see the new map meta. World versus World doesn't have that. The only thing that World versus World has is camaraderie and antagonistic relationships with other guilds that are on your server and other servers. And that might sound like it's not healthy, but it actually makes World versus World really, really interesting, because all of the most of the content is player driven. And so I do think there's an element of servers going away means that even though most people don't really have server pride anymore, it is an element of content that is going to be going away. I don't think people are going to have the same fixation with like, oh, this month we're Moogaloo, let's go Moogaloo boys, Moogaloo team rise up, because those names are just going to like change every month. The core identity of a shard is going to be the 2 or 3 biggest guilds on that shard. You're going to have like the VIP shard. You're going to have the Indo shard. You're going to have probably like the TG shard, because these are guilds that are running 500 members plus and have the size to dictate the way that those matchups are going to look. But I don't know if that's going to have the same feel as something like, a server where you have that server identity.
Yeah, and I don't really get that feel where there is even a server identity on most times. I mean, and this is coming from my experience of mostly being on smaller servers that are not full and are not a host server. So there may be a difference from me to you, but it's not. I guess the linking system is kind of killed server identity for a lot of servers. Like, the only servers that have really kept it are maybe the top 4, or just some random weird ones, but most are gone. Like, the link servers don't have much left, and they just kind of get glommed into the matchup and dominated by the culture of whatever the host is. So for a lot of us, it's long gone, and there's no bringing it back. But I hope some of that feel of camaraderie and teamwork can be kept. And I mean, I kind of enjoy the new server names, and I do a little, Skritzberg Pride stuff or whatever just to get people fired up when we're in one of those betas. But I know what you mean. It's going to be a little bit different, but I do think part of the intent, or at least one of the benefits in my mind, is that it's encouraging guild membership. It's encouraging being part of a guild in Guild Wars, which is something that should happen in my mind. I mean, not that solo players don't have a place in the game mode and aren't beneficial and blah blah blah, but man, there is it's a MMO. It's massively multiplayer, and there's a lot of cool things you can do in guilds, and especially in World vs. World, a lot of the game mode you don't have access to and can't participate in unless you're part of a guild. So I think that moving the team making and the community making more towards those organized groups of players versus just people that randomly picked a cool name is a benefit. And hopefully people do use those bucket, proxy alliance guilds, whatever you want to call them, to kind of band together, because that is where you're going to have an actual more of a community feel, I think. If you have 3 or 4 guilds of 10 that want to band together and they all select the same guild for going into the team, that's your community. It could be 3 guilds of 50, it could be whatever it is. As long as it's under 500, you can make your own community.
Yeah. Although one of the things that I am really interested in doing when the restructuring beta comes out is I've got a couple alliances, or I've got a couple accounts at this point. So my FA account probably has to stick with K&T. I think Ruthless would be upset if I didn't rep the guild because I command for them twice a week.
Yeah.
But with my other 2 accounts, I'm actually kind of interested in seeing how it feels to be a mercenary in the restructuring system and not affiliate with any guild and just watch my matchup change month to month. I want to see what that experience feels like, because I think that's going to be the experience of most people who start playing World versus World.
I think so too, and I think it will be a really, really positive thing, because most people, I don't know about most, I really don't have information to say most, but I think most have never transferred. I would say, particularly among the people that are not members of a larger guild that has transferred, they don't really have a reason to. Why would they dump 800, 1800 gems in the game, whatever? And inertia, and I might know a few people on this server, and I'm loyal to my team. Some people view it like picking a soccer or football team, and they're like, if I change the servers, it's like I'm changing teams, and that makes me a disloyal person. There's a lot of interesting psychological stuff that goes into that. But
yeah, Roy, if you're listening, I think that's actually a really interesting question. Can you generate an infographic that is the percent of the player base that's transferred, including everyone, every single account that's currently active, has it transferred or not? But then every account that's at least rank 100 in World versus World, what percentage of those have transferred? I would be really interested in seeing what that percentage is. Because I don't know if you're right. I think that, I'm not going to say a majority, but if I was just going to throw out a number, I think maybe 25 to 30% of accounts that are at least rank 100 in World v World have transferred at least once.
I think that, yeah, maybe 25% have transferred. I think that's probably right, yeah.
I think that's a big number. I know it's not a majority, but I think that's a big number in the grand scheme of things.
It's really hard to tell, because a lot of people's influence in World vs. World is inflated, and a lot of people are completely silent, and you don't know they're there, and it's really hard to know. Mm-hmm. I mean, you only really notice when large guilds move, but individuals, you could you have no visibility on that, really. But yeah, another thing that we have kind of current in the recent events is the balance patch. Switching gears onto the game itself. The 28th of November, we had one of our bigger balance patches that kind of shook up the builds and the group composition that you see in World vs. World. And Not earth-shattering, but we did see a few things that did kind of change. And I don't know what your thoughts are there, Sheff, or what you've seen on your side.
I mean, can we agree to call it the Chronomancer patch?
I felt like it was more kill barrier scourge patch.
Oh, true. That was this patch as well. Yeah, that's fair. I guess that is going to depend on whether you're on EU or NA, because I never really saw barrier scourge take off on the NA servers.
That's interesting to me too. I don't know. I've heard their meta is different, but I don't know how different it is. So yeah, we were. I mean, I want to say near all the NA guilds were running a barrier scourge in every party prior to this patch because it was just that strong.
I can tell you that Gw2 wasn't. I can tell you that Hate wasn't. I can tell you that I'm pretty sure Bomb wasn't. And then I can't list specific guilds because I don't like to leak other guild secrets beyond those that I'm like involved with on FA. But there's at least 3 other guilds that I play with that also did not run Barrier Scourge at all. Like not even in the comp period.
I mean, I personally did not like that comp, and I fought against it for a few weeks or months, but at some point we tried it and it was just too easy not to use. Like I didn't support that meta, and I knew some other guilds too that were just on principle against it, but man, it was too strong. Like if you didn't use it, you were just kind of hamstringing yourself. So I'm glad they killed it. Like it was too strong.
Yeah, I would have liked to see them change it in different ways. I think the most interesting way that they could have made Barrier Scourge a bit more reasonable is to reduce the duration the barrier lasts, but keep the generation amount the same, so that you have to be more aware of the specific time that it's good to use barrier, rather than just spam it every time you feel like you might need it. But my understanding is that it was actually starting to really become a problem in like GvG comps, where it was so powerful that it was just becoming difficult to kill anyone. And well, I actually really liked playing against groups that used it in open field, because there's a lot of people who will read a build and go, oh, this build says I should use transfuse, guess I should. And don't have any like fundamental idea of how to actually use transfuse well. You could farm free wins off of people who are bad at transfuse.
Yeah.
I had a lot of fun with that.
That was a specific pain point of mine, because having, newer players in general and then having them on a new build, I did not want anybody but the most experienced running transfuse, because man, like you see people like Scourges just in a bad position, already halfway dead, and then they pull dead bodies to them, and it's just a massacre.
that are like a mile off tag, and then also they're not in comms to call their transfuse, so you have no idea that you've had like 4 downs get transfused 900 off your tag. Yeah, I would say that was like, it's a good experience as an enemy commander, because you're like, holy cow, this is just where I push now. It's, I don't want to say tilting, because like it's a game. I play the game to have fun. It's discouraging when you get transfused by somebody who's bad at it, let's say.
Right. I can't think of a lot of other moves in the game where you can screw over your own team as badly as that. Just, whether you want to or not, whether it's a mistake or you're trolling, like you can really screw up a fight if you transfuse at the wrong moment.
And honestly, I love that. I'm glad that they did not touch transfuse at all. I think it's fascinating that there's a skill in the game that when you're bad at it, you actively harm your teammates. I don't mean like, oh, I'm bad at Signet and I cast a Signet, but it was slow, and as a result, the player died. I mean, like, you can kill someone with transfuse who otherwise could have been rezzed by like transfusing them out of a banner, by transfusing them off tag, by transfusing them out of a Signet. And not only that, but when you are coordinated, when you're in comms, when you're in voice, and when you know what you're doing, it's a ridiculously powerful skill. I thought that I thought it was so interesting that there could be that big of a skill divide on it. And I think anytime you have a skill divide that's wide, you have a really good skill.
It definitely produces some interesting gameplay, and when it's played skillfully, yeah, it's really, really good. But yeah, it can also be really bad. So I would encourage any Scourges who are playing that, please be in comms and listening, and don't randomly press transfuse or your shroud, because danger.
Yeah, and like we can hammer it more to death if we want. I've had to fight with people about transfuse because Like, I don't want to put EU on blast in particular, but we'll have people who come over from EU who are like, I'm running transfuse because transfuse is good, and everyone in EU runs transfuse. But not be in comms and not say that they're using transfuse, and then I'll whisper them and be like, hey, please don't run that unless I know that you're doing it. And they're like, what do you mean? Just like play off of my transfuse, duh, obviously.
Oh my god, play off of mine. I that mentality kills me. Like people that just randomly press skills or do a pull or something, and they're like, "What do you mean you didn't want it at that moment? Why can't everyone adjust to me?" Like,
yeah, I think transfuse is an interesting skill.
Yeah,
but yeah, that's fair. I guess it was like the Scourge and Chronomancer patch. I forgot that those changes were in there, honestly, just because transfuse never really took off in the circles that I play in.
So with the Mesmer patches, it's a lot of buffs and inspiration, and then the group stun break. That's the main stuff that's kind of making it more viable on support Chrono, right?
So inspiration is additional sources, and I could get this wrong. If I get this wrong, you can put it in the comments, and you can be like, "Hey, Sheff, you got this wrong." But like I've played very little of this build, and I don't have it in front of me, so I'm liable to make mistakes. Inspiration is primarily like healing and support focused, where you get a little bit of Condi Cleanse, you get a little bit of extra healing. I think Inspiration is the one that puts resistance on Distortion, which is nice. And then Chaos generates Chaos Armor, and like maybe does one or two other things. But Chaos Armor is one of the main draws of this new Chronomancer build, because the idea is that you generate stability off of Mantra of Concentration or off of Distortion. And it's good. Like it's better stability than Firebrand. But the reason Firebrand is not because Firebrand is good at stability, it's because Firebrand has a really, really powerful arsenal of secondary support skills. But you apply stability and then you apply Chaos Armor on top of it, and it makes it virtually impossible to strip the stability unless you strip every other boon that player has, because it buries it under like 6, 7, 8 different boons that all have to be removed first before you can even get to the stability. And then you also spam conditions everywhere. It's a complete nuisance. It puts like a giant pink dome around you. It does a lot.
It's just automatic cover boons without any effort.
Exactly. And like even if you didn't give Chaos Armor, Shatter 1 and Shatter 2 still give 4 cover boons, which is an insane number.
Yeah, it's giving Chrono an interesting role where, I mean, before I guess it was just pure on the boon strip side. But where that role is going to fall, like I don't see it as a Firebrand replacement. I don't think that's really what it can do. I think it has another kind of niche role in the group.
Yeah, I don't know where that's going to land yet. The lens that I've primarily looked at it in is you would run Chronomancer instead of Firebrand. And I think I've played it 3 times now, so I maybe have like 7 hours of seat time on quote-unquote Firebrand replacement stab Chrono. It's fine. I definitely think it's weaker than Firebrand overall, even though your stability coverage is really, really good. What I've actually seen people experimenting with that I think is interesting is taking Domination Chaos, I think is what it is. So you actually still keep all of your boon rip on Shatters, but you also keep all of the Chaos Armor generation and Chaos Aura share. And you kind of run like a strip Chronomancer that also gives stability, which frees up your Firebrands and the rest of your comp to not have to provide so much stability as a result. I think that is probably the more interesting build, but I have really not played that one yet.
Yeah, I could see that working, leaning into more the Chaos Aura than the Inspiration.
I also think it's just a really hard time to give up Boonstrip right now. Like, one of the things that I was hoping for in this November 28th patch is the patch in June, the one that nerfed all of Scourge's corrupts down into strips. One of the things that Roy and CMC said in that stream was that they had a suspicion that it was going to make boon spam worse, and that they were mindful of that, and that in future balance patches they would look at tuning strips and corrupts back up to account for the fact that it was now harder to remove boons. And I thought that's what we were going to get in this November 28th patch. So it's surprising to me that we had effectively no changes to groups' abilities to remove boons. And instead, we've seen what I think is actually just like a disgusting amount of boons that Chronomancer can generate. That's a little concerning. So I think that you might actually end up seeing these groups run Domination Chrono, not necessarily like because it's a good support build, but because you simply can't give up strips. You can't.
Yeah, I think I like the overall big long-term vision that they have for redoing the meta, because that's what it feels like. They brought down corrupts, they brought down heals, they brought down boons significantly a few patches ago, and now they're kind of slowly bringing things up to kind of balance it out better. But I hear a lot of complaints about boon spam, boon ball, meta's bad. The smaller scale groups seem to have even more of an issue with it than, groups of our size, which that's a whole nother topic. I want to get some small scale roamer guests in on the podcast to discuss. But
yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I don't know exactly how they are going to fix it, but I do think they're going to bring down the boons, either hitting boon duration really hard, axing concentration or something, or increasing access to boon strips. But the other thing that I don't think I think the boon rips are more effective at melee range than they used to be, even with the hits to Spellbreaker. Like I think it's pushing the fights into a melee brawl more than the inevitable pirate shipping that we were seeing before, and that's a positive to me. But there's a lot of other reasons that boons are too strong right now that need some help.
Yeah, that was also one of their design goals that they explicitly stated in that June patch. And I have more faith in Roy and CMC to figure this kind of stuff out than I have had faith in previous iterations of the World versus World balance team, which I think at some points has actually just not existed at all. I think they have a pretty good idea of what's good in the meta right now and what's not, and what is overrepresented and what is underrepresented. I think the Druid and Vindicator changes to make them into primary healing and condition cleanse roles is evident that they've got a pretty good idea of how to make a class powerful and usable in a group. And I think they've mostly achieved the same thing with Chronomancer. But, to me, one of the biggest glaring outstanding issues right now is just how easy it is to apply boons to your allies and how hard it is to remove them.
Yeah, and you're right with Chrono having now more access to them. That is a step in the other direction, but it does play into giving more build variety and more roles in the groups. So that's kind of a plus. It's just it needs an overall hit to boons in some way.
Yeah, but yeah, what else is in that patch? They changed. I haven't played it yet because I only have so much free time. They changed Rev Shield, both 4 and 5, and I think made it quite a bit more powerful as a result. I haven't had a chance to play the resulting support Vindicator build, and they were already using Shield. Like the support Vindicator build, I think right now is like Staff plus Mace Shield for Caracosa. And Vindicator did seem like it was kind of a half step behind Druid right now. So it'll be interesting to see how those changes shake out. But that's not like a change to build, it just made the existing build better.
Mm-hmm.
Berserker, completely untouched. If anything, the change to Berserk uptime was a slight buff because you can let Berserk end early now instead of being locked into it. That was also a little bit of an interesting choice because I think a lot of people are kind of grumpy about how good Berserker is right now.
Right. I was expecting an Arc Divider nerf, even though it's already been nerfed. It's still the biggest spike in the game.
Yeah, I was expecting a coefficient adjustment on it as well, so it was a little surprising to not see that. But I actually think that I've been talking to a couple people on EU, and it sounds like they still run Berserker. It's not like they've dropped Berserker completely, but they're running 50-50 splits, or at least including a couple of Hollowsmiths alongside Berserker, just for extra spike generation. So that's interesting, because I haven't seen that percolate into NA yet.
I'm seeing more Hollowsmiths, and I haven't looked. I don't think there was anything particularly buffed with them in this patch, but I'm definitely seeing more of them in groups.
I don't think there are any buffs. I think it's just that, like, Berserker's in meta because Berserker spikes hard, and it turns out that Hollow-Smith actually spikes even harder than Berserkers do with, like, Prime Light Beam. So,
otherwise, in that patch, I mean, there were some new relic options. I don't know how specifically those are being played to affect things, but there were some interesting options.
Have you played around with any of them yet?
I mean, the Resistance relic is nice, but other than that, there's nothing that really stuck out.
I did like the change that they made to Monk and Herald. I mean, after they like hotfixed Monk, so it actually did the thing that they said it would do. Because my initial impression of testing those relics out was that you could make Herald and Monk work, but it was really hard to do because of that 1 second eternal cooldown. Like, you had to be applying boons all the time at every point in a fight, even when it didn't necessarily make sense to do it, just to make sure you didn't lose the stacks. And so I think that was an interesting change. I am hoping that they start to up-tune some of the DPS relics, because it feels like a lot of support professions are pretty spoiled for choice right now in terms of what relics they get to use. And DPS is still kind of stuck making this choice between, like, Ceres, Thief, Fireworks. And I think that's like about it. Like, some classes run Sunless. It feels like there's less relic choices for damage professions than there are for support professions right now.
I have to agree. Yeah, it is between really just those 2 or 3. I don't know what another choice would look like, but there's a lot of options.
Did you play with Relic of Nuris at all? The one that gives you the stacking effect when you remove boons, and then when you hit 10, you do extra damage?
No, I don't think I have.
I played with it on Reaper. I didn't think it was good, but I think it was very fun, and I think it would be an interesting design to pursue. I think if they modified the numbers a little bit, that could become a really interesting relic. It kind of forced me to play... It was this weird dynamic between like a reactionary roll and an actionary roll, where I would be glancing at my boon bar to see what number of stacks I was at for Nuris, and then when I saw that I was at like 8 stacks, I would hit 1 strip skill, and then I would spike, because I could assume that Nuris would be up for part or all of that spike. And I thought that was a really interesting element of like saving some of your personal damage utility skills for Reaper. That's going to be things like GS3, GS2, Focus 5, Axe 2, small skills that your commander doesn't necessarily need to call for you when they need a spike to happen on an enemy group. I thought that was like a cool little bit of like actionary, reactionary style of play. The problem is that for Reaper in particular, it's not as good as Fireworks, because like half your skills turn Fireworks on, and it's better to have 10% damage all the time than to have 10% damage some of the time, or whatever Nuris is. Sorry, it's better to have 7% damage all the time than 10% damage some of the time. Like, looking at Fireworks.
Right. Yeah, I agree. It is an interesting gameplay. You're stripping and stripping until you get your damage boost, and then you spike. But you have to get everything right and have a really big bonus to make it worth it.
Exactly. Another weapon that kind of does something that I think more DPS relics should do is Mace for Ranger in the Weapon Master Beta. I think that Force of Nature stacking effect was also really cool.
Yeah, that's a good segue right there. The new weapons for the classes coming up. I guess that's Q1 as well.
My current hunch is if you open your Wizard's Vault and you go to Special, in the top right corner there is a countdown. And as of the time of this recording, I swear to God, I can give you a screenshot so you know it's true. There's 69 days remaining in the current season. Nice. I think that when that day timer reaches 0 is probably when we'll see the Weapon Master Beta come out, because that's going to be the next seasonal update.
So you're linking the update in the Wizard store there to the actual PvE update?
Yeah, because when the special events end in the Wizard Tower, I presume that's when that tab of special events gets replaced by the special events that come in, like, the next story chapter release. And story chapter releases are usually a major update. So I'm assuming that we'll see the Weapon Master release come with that, but that's an assumption. It could not be true.
It would be nice. I could see that happening.
But yeah, there was a lot of stuff in that beta. What were your guys' initial impressions?
I mean, I kind of hated the whole thing.
Nice. Okay, let's fight about it.
I really liked Dual Pistol, but I don't know if it works too well in Zergs yet.
I don't know. I think Staff Warrior has some nice potential. nothing else kind of really stuck out. I don't know.
What else did you play? Let me ask that.
I didn't really. I don't know. I don't like those weapon betas for some reason. It feels like everything's going to change again so much. It's not even worth it. Like I don't know. I tried out Warrior a little bit and whatever the Guardian was. The pistol. Yeah, I played the pistol a minute, but I mean the pistol is going to be a roaming weapon. It's not going to have application to me anyway. So I'm like, eh. But the Warrior staff could be good. I don't know. I probably should have tried the Necro sword, but I didn't. I don't know if that was a fun weapon or not, but
Necro sword and Warrior staff, I think, were the two weapons I had the most fun playing with.
I tried the Necro sword.
Do you main Necro really that often? Sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you.
Oh, no, you're good. I was just saying that, like, I only tried a few of the new weapons, but ones that I really liked the most were the Necro swords.
It feels really good to give Necromancer a bit of extra mobility. Like, when EOD came out, I was excited about Harbinger, and it turns out that projectile skills aren't very good in World versus World, but the mobility that you got access to through Harbinger Shroud felt like something that Necromancer was really missing in its life, having any kind of mobility skill. And while the main hand sword leap isn't as good as like the two Harbinger leaps that you get, it felt really nice for being able to reposition quickly.
That's true. Yeah, the Necro in general has always suffered from a lack of mobility, so that could be a good option to give them that way into combat.
Also, it's a corrupt. Like we're not allowed to have corrupts anymore. All of our good corrupts have been turned into strips. So the ability of the back half of Necro Sword to eat an entire stack of stability and turn it into fear, I think, like even if the rest of the weapon is pretty bad, I think that's still something that you would probably look at.
Yeah, I don't know. It felt like just from doing normal runs that week, it felt like there were some overtuned skills that just there were really kind of overtuned. I don't know. Yeah, I think there might have been some stuff with Thief Axe actually.
I did see that Thief Axe was like benching 63k on a golem, which I don't do a lot of PvE, but is that like a high number? That seems like a really high number.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you go on like Snow Crows,
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. If you go on like Snow Crows and look at the DPS benchmarks, usually they sit around 50k. I haven't rated since I think it was Coalescence, but yeah.
Okay, so 63k is pretty good.
Yeah, it's really good.
I also thought the mechanic was neat. Like you leave the axes behind and then you pull them back to you. I thought that was really, really cool. It's something that I said in the Weapon Master beta that I did as well, but the fear targeting on the offhand sword for Necro felt really wonky to me. Like you launch an orb and then you pull it back and it fears people it passes through on the way back. I think it'd be really neat if that skill was actually just the way that axes worked, where like you throw the fear orb out, it sits there on the ground and it doesn't do anything, and then anytime you want, you can just recall it back to you.
It's an interesting mechanic, yeah. It kind of it controls the area a lot more than other skills.
And it makes your personal position decisions more interesting. Like, you know, when you're playing in a Zerg, you want to stay on tag, but when an enemy group is pushing on your tag, you also want to take a little bit of like personal responsibility for knowing that you probably can't live on the tag and you're going to have to dodge at least once and then make your way back just to survive a bomb. And if you have like an axe on the ground or a fear orb on the ground or like whatever on the ground, you can kind of make an informed decision about where you want to dodge so that you can maximize the value of that skill while you get back to tag. And I thought that was a really interesting element of like a bit of personal accountability and personal skill level in a Zerg context where you can control a little bit of that.
And are we expecting these weapons specifically with the new PvE patch? That's probably how it's going to work, right?
I'd assume so. Yeah, I think it'd be weird if they released it off schedule. But, you know, who knows? ANET is a fickle and unpredictable beast.
That's just going to be chaos. I don't know. We'll see. Yeah, and the other announcement as far as the previous news update was the Guildhall update. I don't know if you guys on your end get involved with much of the GvG scene, but do you think that's actually going to pull some of the fights out of Edge of the Mist and World vs. World maps for kind of GvG purposes, or is it not going to get used that much?
I think so. Like, I don't necessarily think it's something that has to happen. It's not like there's massive groups on EOTM complaining about, GvG groups clogging up the map. What I do think is interesting about that element is and disclaimer, I haven't GvG'd in like a year. I have previously GvG'd in my life, never at like a super high level, but I've played GvGs, so I'm like a little familiar with the scene. I think it's going to be very, very cool for tournaments because you're going to be able to construct an arena in your guild hall that, kind of shows off like your guild's vibe, your guild's character. And I think it would be really neat for people like, Sunny and other people who do GvG casting to treat GvGs like sporting events where you're going to, Cheese Stadium. And this is like the Guildhall arena that they've built, and they're hosting these rounds. And you just kind of get to see this different character and personality, these different guilds. Now, you might have to do a little bit of work to make sure that nobody's constructing Guildhall decorations that are like TOSable on Twitch, because I wouldn't put it past people to try and do that. But I think it's a really neat change for just introducing like a bit of character and a bit of personality to the game mode rather than every single GvG fight just being on, the flat circle in EOTM.
Man, I had not even thought about that. Being able to construct your own arena. Yeah, since you can
it would be sick. Like, it would be really cool.
Yeah, there's so many decorations and weird things that people have built in their guild halls, and to be able to use them in an actual tournament is a crazy thing.
Yeah, this might be a little sacrilegious. I've never been super involved in the GvG scene. I will disclaim it every single time because the last thing I want to invite into my life is the ire of GvG players. But GvG's always kind of struck me as being a little Final Destination no items for people who are familiar with like the Smash Bros scene. It's a very clinical, sterile environment where the only thing that you're really doing is taking 15 players, lining them up and smashing them against each other on a completely flat playing surface. And one of the things that I want to see is if anybody who's particularly good at map making builds GvG arenas that have terrain, because it's one of the things that I'm interested in. Like, it's one of the things that I think makes open fielding neat is that every fight is slightly different. It's on slightly different terrain. You have slightly different line of sight. There are pillars, obstacles, corners, stairs, all this other kind of stuff that you can use to extract an advantage out of your positioning, force your opponent into making a mistake. And I know that a lot of the motivation behind GvGs is that it is like, a pure expression of skill without terrain in the way. But I do wonder if there's going to be a little bit of experimentation with things like terrain features, a la like, I don't know, for people who played, WoW or SPVP, there's interesting terrain in SPVP maps that you can factor into your decision making. And I'm curious to see if any of that kind of takes off for doing GvG fights now that we can build our own arenas and do our own map making.
Yeah, that has a lot of potential. I mean, you could go so many directions with it and have somebody, filming it from a sky scale whatever angle they want.
Yeah, I think it's going to go crazy for casting. And I think the GvG scene is active enough right now that you'll probably have a couple of really neat tournaments that come out of it once it's live, as long as there's some kind of fix in that pipeline for the way that instancing works in guild halls. Because my understanding from talking to other people about it is that it can be a little bit wonky / broken right now. Like, as long as you can get everyone into the guild hall, I think it will be really, really neat for not only doing GvGs, but also introducing GvGs to people who might not be familiar with them in a world versus world context, because it's a purely player driven subset of the game mode. It's rules invented by players because they decided that this is something that would be fun. And I think that makes it really interesting from the perspective of thinking about what's in the game mode, is you have this thing that players have decided is fun and they want to do.
It will definitely open it up to the wider community, and I mean, I think there are PvE guilds just lurking out there who don't know how to talk to or haven't gotten into World vs. World enough to even find other guilds to fight that'll have options now to just, I don't know, throw something on the forum and challenge people or whatever.
Or be like, hey, we're a PvP guild, or we're a PvE guild that like specializes in building guild halls. Do you need us to construct a GVG arena for you?
Wow.
Do like some contract work come out of that?
Decorator as a profession, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I like that angle too, when people can get more creative and find other game modes to create within the game because of stuff like this. That's really cool. All right. Well, I mean, we have gone extra long on this episode, but I think we've got some really good stuff in here. Sheff, I don't know if there's anything you want to plug as far as your current projects or your YouTube or your guild or whatnot. This is your time. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I continue to sit on my channel and do my own thing. So it's SheffPlaysGames on YouTube. I do intro build guides, primers, rotation tips, things like that for people who are getting into the game mode for the first time and want to see some footage tied to commentary of, do this, then this, then this, if you want to be good at X profession. I also run a series on that channel called Commander Camp, which is a primer for people who want to get involved in commanding in World vs. World and leading their own squads. And every once in a while, when there's a big balance patch that comes out, I'll do a bit of general commentary on it. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, pop over to YouTube, hit the subscribe button, ring that bell, all the things that other creators tell you to do. And yeah, keep yourself up to date and having fun in the game mode.
Yeah, Sheff puts out some great content. I have learned from that stuff myself.
And we'll go ahead and throw his link in the description.
Yeah, like and subscribe us as well, and tell your friends and your guild. And if you guys have any kind of thoughts on what we've been talking about in this episode, or you have any questions for Sheff or us, you can throw those in the comments. We're always looking for ideas for new episodes as well. But otherwise, thanks for listening/watching. I'm Criff.
And this was Salamander.
And I was Sheff.
And thanks for listening to State of the Mist.
Catch you guys next time.